The security guard's hand went up. Julia Roberts smiled. And everything changed. It was October 2023. The Beverly Hilton Hotel. A charity gala benefiting the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. The kind of event Los Angeles does well, elegant, expensive, designed to raise money while making everyone feel good about themselves. The invitations had gone out 3 months earlier. Embossed cardstock. Gold lettering. You are cordially invited to an evening hosted by Julia Roberts. Her name. Her event. Her cause. But at 7:47 p.m., Julia Roberts stood outside the entrance, unable to get in. The security guard was young. Maybe 25. Navy suit. Earpiece. Clipboard with a laminated guest list attached. He'd been hired by the event company, given strict instructions: no one enters without verification. No exceptions. Julia had arrived alone. No assistant. No manager. No entourage. She'd driven herself from Malibu, listening to NPR, thinking about the children she'd visit tomorrow at the hospital. She was wearing a simple black gown, elegant but not flashy. Minimal jewelry. Hair pulled back. She looked like herself, which is to say she looked like someone who didn't need to prove anything. She approached the entrance. The red carpet. The velvet ropes. The warm golden light spilling from inside where 300 guests were already mingling. The security guard stepped forward, hand raised politely but firmly. "Good evening, ma'am. May I see your invitation?" Julia smiled. "I don't have it with me. I'm Julia Roberts." The guard looked at her. Really looked. And didn't recognize her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I need to verify you're on the list. What name should I look for?" "Roberts. Julia Roberts." He scanned his clipboard. Ran his finger down the alphabetical list. Flipped to the second page. Then the third. "I'm sorry," he said, looking up with genuine apologetic confusion. "Your name isn't on the list." Julia didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Inside the ballroom, guests were arriving in clusters. Producers, directors, studio executives. People who worked in entertainment, who would absolutely recognize Julia Roberts if they saw her. But the entrance system had been designed with multiple checkpoints: valet, red carpet, security screening, coat check. And Julia had bypassed the normal arrival process by driving herself and parking in the hotel's general lot. The guard was just doing his job. Following protocol. He had no reason to believe this woman in a simple black dress, carrying a small clutch, arriving alone without an assistant or photographer or any of the usual Hollywood machinery, was Julia Roberts. Julia looked at him. Not with anger. Not with indignation. With something closer to understanding. "I see," she said quietly. "May I ask who organized the security for tonight?" "Prestige Event Services, ma'am. But I need to follow procedure. If you could provide identification or contact someone on your team to verify." "Of course," Julia said. She took one small step backward, yielding the entrance path. "You're doing your job. I respect that." She moved to the side of the entrance, near a decorative planter, out of the flow of arriving guests. She opened her clutch and reached for her phone. The guard watched her uncertain. Something in her calm acceptance made him uneasy. Most people, when denied entry, got angry. Demanded to speak to managers. Made scenes. This woman had simply stepped aside. Julia looked at her phone screen. She could call her publicist. Her assistant. The event coordinator. Anyone who could sort this out in 30 seconds. Instead, she looked up at the entrance. At the banner visible through the glass doors. Children's Hospital Foundation Gala. Hosted by Julia Roberts. She looked at the young security guard, who was now checking in a couple in formal wear, processing them smoothly. And she made a decision. She put her phone back in her clutch without making any calls. She would wait. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. 3 minutes passed. Then 5. Julia stood near the planter, hands folded in front of her, watching the entrance. Other guests arrived, were processed, entered smoothly. A few glanced at her curiously, a woman in an evening gown standing alone outside the entrance, but no one stopped to ask if she needed help. Hollywood operates on a specific visual language. If you look like you belong, you belong. If you arrive with an entourage, you're important. If you stand alone, uncertain, outside the flow of traffic, you're invisible. Julia had spent 30 years navigating this language. She knew exactly what signals she was sending by standing there quietly. And she chose to send them anyway. The security guard processed another couple, then glanced back at Julia. She was still there. Still calm. Still waiting. Something shifted in his expression. Uncertainty creeping in. He approached her again. "Ma'am, were you able to reach someone?" "I haven't called anyone yet," Julia said. "You haven't?" "No. But you said you're Julia Roberts." "The Julia Roberts." "Who's hosting this event?" "I am." "Then why wouldn't you just call someone to verify?" Julia looked at him. Really looked at him. And saw what he couldn't see in himself yet, a young man trying to do the right thing, following rules, taking his job seriously in a world that often didn't take security seriously enough. "Because you're doing exactly what you should be doing," she said gently. "You're following protocol. You're not letting someone in just because they claim to be someone. And that's good. That's important." The guards stared at her. "But if you're really..." "I am. But you have no way of knowing that right now. You're protecting this event. You're protecting the people inside. And I don't want you to compromise that just because someone, even if it's me, asks you to bend the rules." Silence. The sound of laughter drifting from inside the ballroom. Music starting up. The gala beginning without its host. "What do you want me to do?" the guard asked, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Keep doing your job," Julia said. "Someone will figure it out eventually. Or I'll call my team in a few minutes. But right now, I want you to know you did the right thing." Away from the cameras, Julia made a choice no one expected. Inside the ballroom, the event coordinator, a woman named Patricia Chen who'd been organizing high-profile events for 15 years, was checking her tablet, running through the evening's schedule. Welcome remarks at 8 p.m. Julia's opening speech at 8:15 p.m. Dinner service at 8:30 p.m. She glanced at her watch. 7:52 p.m. Julia should be here by now. Patricia pulled out her phone and called Julia's assistant. No answer. She called Julia's publicist. Voicemail. A small flutter of concern. Julia was never late. Never. Patricia walked toward the entrance, weaving through clusters of guests. She stepped outside, into the cooler evening air, and looked around the arrival area. And saw Julia Roberts standing near a planter, talking quietly with the security guard. Patricia froze. Processed the scene. Understood immediately what had happened. She rushed over. "Julia! Oh my God, I'm so sorry, there must have been a..." Julia held up one hand gently. "Patricia, it's fine. This gentleman was doing his job perfectly." Patricia turned to the security guard, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Do you have any idea who this is?" "This is Julia Roberts. She's hosting this event. Her name is on everything. How could you not?" "Patricia." Julia's voice was quiet but firm. "Stop." Patricia stopped. Julia looked at the security guard. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he said, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him. "Marcus Williams." "Marcus, how long have you been working security?" 3 months, ma'am. This is my first big event." Julia nodded. "You did everything right tonight. You checked the list. You asked for verification. You didn't let someone in just because they told you who they were. In a world where security matters more than ever, that's exactly what you should do." She turned to Patricia. The mistake wasn't his. The mistake was in the system. My name should have been on that list. Someone in the planning process missed it. But Marcus did his job exactly as he was trained to do. Patricia looked stricken. I'll check with the event company. Someone will be fired for this. No one will be fired, Julia said, her voice taking on a quality that made it clear this wasn't a request. This was a system error, not a person error. What will happen is we'll review the checklist process to make sure hosts are always on the entry list. That's all. She looked at Marcus again. May I go inside now? Marcus, who looked like he might cry, nodded mutely and stepped aside. Julia walked toward the entrance, then paused and turned back. Marcus, one more thing. At the end of the night, before you leave, please come find me. I'd like to talk to you for a moment. Then she walked inside, leaving Marcus standing at the entrance, trying to process what had just happened. But what followed stayed with everyone who witnessed it, forever. The gala proceeded smoothly. Julia gave her opening remarks. She spoke about the children at the hospital, about the importance of funding pediatric care, about the nurses and doctors who worked miracles every day. Her speech was warm, genuine, effective. Checks were written. Pledges were made. But throughout the evening, Julia kept thinking about Marcus. About the look on his face when he realized who he'd turned away. About how easily she could have humiliated him, could have made a scene, could have gotten him fired. About how the smallest choices define who we are. At 11:30 p.m., as guests were leaving and the event staff was beginning cleanup, Marcus was preparing to end his shift. He'd spent the entire evening replaying those first minutes, feeling sick with embarrassment, wondering if he'd just destroyed his fledgling security career. A woman in an event staff uniform approached him. Mr. Williams? Ms. Roberts asked if you could meet her in the Wilshire room. Just down that hallway. Marcus's stomach dropped. This was it. The polite, private firing. He walked down the carpeted hallway, his footsteps silent, and found the door to the Wilshire room. A small private lounge used for VIP gatherings. He knocked softly. Come in, Julia's voice called. He opened the door. The room was empty except for Julia, sitting in one of the chairs, her gown replaced with jeans and a simple sweater. She looked tired but peaceful. Marcus, thank you for coming. Please sit. He sat, hands clasped in his lap, preparing for whatever was coming. Julia looked at him. I wanted to talk to you because what happened tonight matters. Not the mistake. The mistake was minor, easily fixed. What matters is how you handled yourself. Ma'am, you followed the rules even when it would have been easier not to. You didn't recognize me, but you also didn't assume I was nobody just because I arrived alone. You were polite. Professional. And when you realized what had happened, you didn't make excuses. That's rare. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. Not her personal card. Something else. This is the contact information for the head of security at my production company. We're always looking for people who take their work seriously. People who understand that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. Marcus stared at the card. I don't understand. You will, Julia said. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, you'll be faced with another choice. Someone will offer you money to look the other way. Or someone powerful will tell you the rules don't apply to them. And you'll remember tonight. You'll remember that doing your job with integrity matters more than making important people comfortable. She stood. Marcus stood too, automatically. Keep that card, Julia said. When you're ready for a change, or when you need a reference, call that number. Tell them I sent you. Tell them you're the security guard who didn't let Julia Roberts into her own gala. Marcus laughed despite himself, tears in his eyes. They'll think I'm crazy. They'll think you have integrity. Julia corrected. There's a difference. She walked him to the door, then paused. Marcus, one last thing. Tonight you learned something important. How you treat people when you have the power matters more than how you treat people when they have the power. Remember that. 4 months later, Marcus Williams became head of security for Julia Roberts' production company. On his first day, he found a framed photo on his desk, Julia standing outside the Beverly Hilton entrance, smiling, with Marcus's hand raised in that stopping gesture. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. The caption beneath it read, "The night we both did our jobs." Julia never told anyone the full story. But everyone who worked with Marcus noticed something. He never forgot a face again. And he never, ever compromised on protocol. Years later, when asked about his career success, Marcus would say, "I once turned away Julia Roberts. And instead of ruining me, she taught me that doing the right thing is always worth it." The guest list error was never repeated. But more importantly, either was the lesson.